Everyone, and it's nice to see you all here. I'm Councillor Sam Smith, the chairman of this Children and Young People's Select Committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to this first meeting of our Children and Young People's Select Committee, which is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. Can I start by saying how much of an exciting time it is for this committee to be launched? As many of you will know, the government have launched lots of new legislation proposals that bring many opportunities for this county, and it's our responsibility to highlight those opportunities and potential issues and go out, find out how we can absorb those opportunities for the whole county, then present them to Cabinet. So it's a very exciting time to be on it, and I thank you all for choosing to be here. Item 1 is apologies of absence. Can I ask Peter if we have any, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Adams is substituting for Councillor Cubley. Councillor Carr is substituting for Councillor Shaw, and Councillor Henshaw is substituting for Councillor Henry, all for this meeting only. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to those substitutes, and thank you for stepping in. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? No. Do any members or officers present any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? No. So far, so good. Item 3 is members and terms of reference, which I formally move the recommendation on page 3 of the report. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, second it, Chair.
Thank you very much. This report is just for noting, unless members have any comments. I will move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Anyone against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That's unanimous. Before we move on to item 4, I'd just like to bring in Lucy, who's going to give a presentation on the work of the Children and Young People's Department and one on overview and scrutiny. Can I ask Lucy to deliver the presentation, please?
Good morning, members. My name's Lucy Peel. I'm a Service Director in Children and Families. Before I start, can I just check that members can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great, thanks ever so much. And I might ask my colleague Steve Edwards, who's in the chamber with you, to step in if there are any specific questions that members may have. So I'll give a brief overview of the work that we do within Children and Family Services. The work of the department is underpinned by a range of local authority duties, particularly in respect of our most vulnerable children and young people. So we have a key sets of responsibilities around safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children, and ensuring that we provide a range and level of services appropriate to the range of children and families' needs. We have a range of responsibilities around education, adoption, safeguarding vulnerable children, those children with special educational needs. And in a moment, I'll go on to talk about how we provide those services. So there are specific key statutory duties on the Director of Children's Services. So that's Colin Pettigrew, who's on annual leave today. And on the lead member, the Cabinet member for Children's Services, in working to ensure that we secure the provision that our children and young people need, that we work closely with partners to ensure that they are also doing what we need them to do to improve outcomes for children and young people, and also that we make sure that we're scrutinising effectively the performance of the local authority, particularly in respect of our responsibilities around children's education and around social care, and making sure critically that children and families are involved in the way that we design and develop the services that we provide in Nottinghamshire. So a bit of context about the county. So we're one of the largest children's services authorities in the country. And at our last full inspection by Ofsted in 2019, we were judged to be a good overall local authority. There are approximately getting on towards 170,000 children and young people aged under 18 living in the county, which is around 20% of the total population. And 14% of our children are deemed to be living in poverty. Members will know that we have a range of, in terms of the communities within the county, we have some areas with significant levels of deprivation and some areas where there is significantly more affluence. And of course, that impacts on the range of services that we provide, particularly in terms of supporting those children who are the most vulnerable. In terms of those children that we support, so whilst we have a range of responsibilities to all children and young people in the county, particularly those who are school age, so that would be, for example, ensuring that we have sufficient school places across the county and that we run admission arrangements for those children. We also have very specific responsibilities for a small number of children who are the most vulnerable in the county. And so currently we're supporting approximately 4,419 children. So they would be children who are in need of what we call early help or statutory social care services. So those children who may be vulnerable, who may need additional support in order to enable them to be safe, healthy, well, and to achieve their best outcomes. For those children who are at risk of harm, we have additional duties to protect them. And so currently we're protecting 611 children through what's called a child protection plan. And we have 949 children who are looked after by the local authority, meaning they've come into our care and are and are being looked after either by foster carers or in residential care, or perhaps with extended friends and family members. In addition, we support 3,413 children who have an education, health and care plan. So they would be children who have special educational needs and who need additional levels of support in order to make good progress, both in school, but also in terms of their wider wellbeing outcomes. So the vision for children and families is the vision that we have as a department in terms of working together with families and with partners to challenge the impact of disadvantage and discrimination, and to provide support, protection, education so that young people essentially can be health well and can be the best version of themselves. We provide a range of services within children and families, so ranging from the what we would call universal provision, so those services which are available to anybody. So we've got young people services, early childhood services, including children's centres. We have a service called the Family Service, which provides more targeted support, for example, parenting support for families who may benefit from some additional support. And then we provide a range of specialist services for children who have higher levels of need, whether that's from a protection perspective because they're at risk of harm, or if they're involved in the criminal justice system. And then, of course, we also provide care for those young people who need to live with someone other than their birth parents. In terms of education, learning and skills, as Councillor Smith said in his introduction, this is an area which is currently there's a potential policy change, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but we have a range of responsibilities around making sure that we've got enough school places across the county, that all children are able to access their full educational entitlement, and that for those children that need some additional support to achieve well in school, we have a role in supporting that also, as well as in driving up the standards of schools, particularly those who are local authority maintained. I've already alluded to the work we do around children who have special educational needs. So we have a requirement to assess whether a child needs an education, health and care plan in order to support their educational progress at school, though we also provide what's called a graduated response. So additional support into schools without the need for an educational care plan to enable as many children as possible to have their needs met in a school in their local communities. And then finally, we commission a range of placements for children in care and children in need of alternative or specialist provision. So that's where the council itself isn't able to directly provide a foster placement, for example. We work with external agencies in order to make sure that we have enough care provision for those children. So this slide outlines our budget. So the revenue budget within children and families currently is approximately £162 million, of which £90 million is within the Commissioning and Resources Division. A significant proportion of that is spent on external care, so those placements I just talked about. And then £52 million on youth, families and social work, which is predominantly staffing, so that would be the cost of our early help workforce, our social workers, and other workforce members who work with children and families, and then a much smaller amount on our core responsibilities around education, learning and skills. This is because the Dedicated Schools Grant, which is passported to schools via the local authority, is directed directly to schools rather than being resource that's spent by the local authority. So the context then, we're in a position within children and families where there are lots of potential national policy changes which will change the way that we are required to provide children's services in the future. So the first of those is the Opportunities for All Schools White Paper and Schools Bill, and that's around the future of schools and the future of local authorities' role in relation to schools and whether or not that promotes all schools becoming academies, for example. The second paper, which is currently a green paper out to consultation, is around changing the way that we provide support for those children with special educational needs. And then the final national policy reform is in the area of children's social care. So there's been an independent review that was published a couple of months ago, and a child safeguarding practice review also. And the government is currently considering its response to those recommendations. So taken together, these legislative changes have the potential, as I say, to really change the way that we provide services to children and families in Nottinghamshire. We are, of course, continuing to deliver and seek to improve our services through a range of existing plans, so both articulated within the council plan, in particular in areas around supporting communities and families, keeping children safe, and building skills that help people to get good jobs. So that's where some of our schools work would sit. And then we have a range of other strategies which seek to improve and further improve outcomes for children and families. So Best Start, which is focusing on the early years of a child's life. Our Early Help strategy, which is around how we can better support families earlier in order to reduce the need for social care involvement. And there's a couple of key government agendas there around family hubs, so very much delivering early help services in local communities and supporting families, which again is about taking a whole family approach, so seeing children's need within the context of their wider families. Our strategy for improving outcomes for looked after children and care leavers, and that's within the context of us having corporate parenting responsibilities to those children and young people as a council. And then finally, strategies around improving educational opportunities for all, so that's around closing the gap for those children who have greater levels of disadvantage. And those who don't, and then our special educational needs and disabilities policy. So the last two slides talk to our current areas of focus within children and families. So the first is around embedding strength-based approaches across children and family services. So again, this is very much around working with communities to ensure that we're developing resilience and community resources and ensuring that we're working collaboratively with families when we're trying to address the needs and challenges that families are experiencing. Embedding consistently good quality social work practice. So this is within the context of our Ofsted regulatory framework, and recognising that actually by providing really good quality social work practice, that enables us to both improve children's outcomes but also reduce cost. The third strand then linked to that is around accelerating the transformation of children's services, and so we have a range of transformation projects underway through the council's portfolio transformation activity, to try and develop a much more responsive offer to children and families and those professionals who are working with them, so that we can support families as early as possible. And those projects include a range of initiatives around, for example, developing more kind of multi-agency teams to support children within their communities, so that we're addressing the issues that adults are experiencing as well as children. Developing more support for kinship carers, extended friends and family carers, so that more children can live again in their local communities, and growing the number of children, the number of foster placements, so that children who aren't able to live with their parents can live locally. And then finally, and again, this links back to the policy reform that I've already referenced, priorities around improving families' experiences of the SEND system. So that's within the context both of the proposals in the Green Paper, but also some national and local challenges around education, health and care plans. Ensuring that we have sufficient school places, both in our mainstream schools and our specialist schools, and sufficiency of childcare in the early years. And then finally, developing our local response, our Nottinghamshire response to the proposals within the schools bill, particularly around academisation, the proposal to develop a local authority-led multi-academy trust. So I'll stop sharing, Councillor Smith, if that's okay, and take a pause.
Thanks, Lucy, for setting out the work of the Children and Young People's Department. I think that's really useful for us committee members to reference back to when discussing our work on this committee. Does anyone have any questions for Lucy around the work of the Children and Young People's Department? Yes, please, Councillor Henshaw.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. In relation to the point that you raised on child poverty, you mentioned 14%. Can you explain to the committee what criteria you used to determine that figure, please? Thanks.
Thanks for that question. Lucy?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. Off the top of my head, I'd have to check with my performance colleagues who pulled that data together. We normally use the Adachi indexes, but I can check and confirm if that's okay.
I'll see if my left-hand man, Mr. Edwards, knows the answer. Thank you, Lucy.
I'm pretty sure it's DFE information and from the Office of National Statistics that provide that for us.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Carr, please.
Is this the bit where we come up with ideas, or is that later?
That's item 4. We're just on item 3 at the moment. Anything about the Children and Young People's Department, if you've got any questions?
Only that the schools bill is an absolute nightmare if anybody's bothered to read it. At a time when, as a council, we're actually quite rightly asking for more devolved powers to come back to this council, the schools bill does exactly the opposite. And it is a worry that national government are going to have so much control over local education.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clara. Item 4, we're going to talk about the work programme, and I think a big part of that initial work programme is going to be the white paper and the impact here, so feel free to feed into that there. If there's no more questions for Lucy, yep, Mr Edwards.
Just wanted to say a couple of things, really. The first thing, when Lucy was talking about the numbers, 4,000 children known to social care, another 2,000 known to early help. I guess you know this already, but those numbers change. It isn't 4,000 children a year, it's about 4,000 children, but there are 35,000 a year referrals to the MASH. So it's not always the same 4,000 children, is the point that I'm trying to make. The other point that I want to try to make is that if councillors want to spend some time with an early help worker or a social worker to get a sense of what our frontline colleagues do, I'm very happy to arrange that for people. I would encourage people to come and see what we do, because I think social care and social work, particularly for children, it's something that by its very nature is quite confidential. So councillors often don't have a lot of first-hand experience of it, and it's also quite high profile, particularly when, sadly, when things go wrong in councils. So if people do, as part of their role on this committee, want to shadow someone, it's just something that can be arranged.
Thank you for that, Mr Edwards, and as you say, it's valuable experience, so do get in touch to arrange that. I'm going to move on to item 4 now, which is a discussion about the work programme. As I said at the start, there is exciting things going on and for us to be getting on with. But before we discuss that, I'm just going to ask Democratic Services to deliver a presentation on the work of overview and scrutiny. Please, Noel, and then I'll open up the floor for discussion.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Unfortunately, our senior scrutiny officer, Martin Elliott, can't be here today. So it falls to me as the scrutiny support officer for this meeting to give the presentation. So if you just bear with me a moment. So that slide basically gives you a visual reminder of the relationship between the Overview Committee and the 3 select committees, as well as the Statutory Health Scrutiny Committee and the Police and Crime Panel. So that's the scrutiny function in its totality. And specifically for this committee, there are 3 key relationships to bear in mind. First of all is that with the Overview Committee itself, in that it will be approving the work programmes for all 3 select committees. Secondly, the relationship with Cabinet, in that Overview Committee and the 3 select committees are there to hold the Cabinet to account. And also the relationship with other select committees, in that there will be topics that will be cross-cutting between committees, and it's fair to say that most likely between this committee and its adult equivalent, as it were, because there will be perhaps transition issues or the like that both committees would be interested in looking at. So the next slide is basically the we moved on? We haven't. Sorry. There we are. So basically, Scrutiny is now essential and a central part of the governance system that we have, and the executive arrangements in place with the Cabinet cannot exist without your role also being in place. While you're not decision takers, you will play a key role in the decision-making process, in that you're there to act as a critical friend of the executive and to hold the administration as a whole to account. Scrutiny activity shouldn't be political, and it can include reviewing services to see if they're functioning as well as they can, or it might be around championing the issues that residents have raised and are of particular concern within the remit of this committee. There is also a real opportunity for Scrutiny to have a key role in the pre-decision stage of developing the policies and the strategies of the Council. And having an effective work programme to underpin that work will enable Scrutiny activity to be focused where it can have the most benefit and impact for both the Council and its residents. So, to get an effective work programming underway, we need to get into the process of identifying and carrying and the key issues that members would like to look at. Now, all 4 committees carry out this exercise, and once that's done, we'll get into the process of refining, prioritising and filtering the issues raised to make sure that we have the right issues dealt with in the right way and in the right part of the scrutiny framework. Now, once topics have been agreed, there will then be a consideration given to how best they're looked at. Now, that could be either a report to committee, it could involve a short spotlight review, or it could be dealt with by a longer task and finish group exercise with recommendations flowing from that. And the work programme needs to be both forward and backward looking. Monitoring and reviewing activity does need to take place to see what impact your work has had. An effective monitoring and implementation of scrutiny recommendations is at least as important, if not more important, than the recommendations made in the first place. Next slide covers the principles, the key considerations for potential scrutiny items, and these would involve considering whether it's a topic where scrutiny can make a positive impact or where scrutiny can make a difference, whether an issue is a council priority as detailed in the council plan, and whether the topic is an issue that is of interest to or makes a significant impact on residents across the county. And if topics don't meet these criteria, then the question needs asking, why is scrutiny looking at it? You'll then need to consider how best to deal with each issue that's raised. As I said before, that could be either through committee report, spotlight, or project work. Scrutiny will be able to make the most maximum impact by looking at big issues that impact on large parts of the county, large numbers of residents, or which are a corporate priority. It's also good practice not to look at a matter which has recently been reviewed or which has recently either a new or a recently changed service. That's not to say that you couldn't look at it at some point down the line, but when something's new, we need to give that its time to embed before we would conduct scrutiny activity. And it goes without saying that there will be capacity issues to consider in respect of the amount and level of scrutiny that can be delivered within the amount of time you and all of us can commit to carrying out effective scrutiny and reviews. And the best way to ensure that we are really clear the best way to ensure that we get the most out of the process is to be really clear about the desired outcomes of the scrutiny work that is being carried out. Just bear with. Right, so in terms of the process itself, the process is detailed in the LGA workbook, and we have a visual reminder on the screen there of the main stages involved. You'll be aware that there's already been discussion at Overview Committee on potential topics for scrutiny to look at both by the Overview Scrutiny and the 3 select committees, and today will provide the opportunity for yourselves to add to that list the topics that you would like to see explored through the scrutiny process. And once each committee has developed its long list, there will then be work carried out between the chairs and vice chairs to whittle down the lists to make sure there isn't any duplication between the select committees and overview, and then look to populate the work programme in a way that uses your time and resources to the best effect. The intention is to come back in September with a fully populated work programme, and ideally to get to a place where you can have some scope of works to discuss, approve and get underway in earnest in September. And the final slide is just an indication of the timescales for future meetings. The municipal diary should be published imminently, and we can get more detail on that shortly. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Noel, for outlining the roles and responsibilities and potential work streams for this committee. I think we now have a slide with some suggestions on for further future topics that we can discuss that came out of the first overview and scrutiny meeting. Thank you. Noel, are you speaking to?
Sorry, it's Lucy that's introducing this, as I understand it.
Over to you, Lucy, please.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. This is the list of initial work programme suggestions that have arisen through the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee and at the pre-agenda that took place for this committee. So the first is in respect of the implementation of the schools bill, which we've already talked about, and the work that will need to take place as the Council develops its response in respect of the recommendations within the bill. The second area put forward has been around sufficiency of school places. So that's around whether we have sufficient school places at different phases, for example, at the transition from primary to secondary, and the link there with what's called basic need and school building projects. So looking at how we're growing the schools estate in order to ensure that there's sufficient places in the parts of the county where there is need. The third proposal was around exploring the implications of the Green Paper for special educational needs, which is currently out for consultation, and linked to that, exploring the quality, timeliness and impact of education, health and care plans on our children and young people. The next suggestion was around exploring the implications of the independent review of children's social care, which makes a series of recommendations for reform of the way that we provide children's social care services. The Council already has a programme, a transformation programme underway in order to improve both the quality of practice, but also the ensure that children are supported as close to their communities as possible. So there's a potential there to look at the Council's programme against the recommendations to see how they align. The next strand is around the Department's performance against the Ofsted framework for the inspection of local authority children's services, and exploring improvement plans to make sure to look at the extent to which the authority is improving in the areas that have been identified. And then there are two areas which have been put forward which would potentially be jointly with colleagues in adult social care. So that's around recruitment and retention challenges, particularly with the social work workforce, and then transitions between adults and children's services. So particularly for those children and young people who have disabilities and will need services as they transition into adulthood. And then the final area that's been put forward to date is around early years childcare sufficiency and funding.
Thank you, Lucy, for outlining those draft proposals. I'll open up for discussion now. Councillor Lee, you had your hand up first.
Chairman, thank you. I've got two bits that I want to add to it, but one on your significant of school places. I welcome that, actually. Congratulate you on that one. Are we going to look at, as part of that, if a new school is being built near an older school, if both schools are needed, or if the places could be taken up by a new school? And where I state this is Christchurch, as you know, that I represent in Middlebeck. We knocked down an old school that wasn't meeting need and had the new school that's going to be 3 times the size of the old school. And in your ward, as you know, there'll be a new school allocated in your ward. If that could be built to be able to meet all the needs instead of sending 1,000 children out into Coddington each day. So is that going to be incorporated into that? And then the two bits I'd like to add is the budgets and ebbs and flows in departments. Can we have a look at that to see if there is an increase in certain periods of the year or a decrease, and have a look at that with departments, because it might bring out some future work we might want to look out on that. And then something, as you know, I'm very passionate about is our foster and adoption services. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I'd like to look at that. Our internal services that we provide, and also external that our third parties provide as well, see if there's any learning in that as well, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Just on budgets, there's a main overview and scrutiny committee that's been asked to review all budgets, and that will be coming out as the budget setting period gears up. So yes, that will be done through there. We are looking at recruitment and retention, but I wondered if Steve might want to add something into that. But before we do, on place planning, as we look at reviewing place planning, it will take into account birth rates and projections on growth in pupil numbers, but also surrounding schools and what their pan is and what the new pan of the new school will be and the impact that will have. So that will all be under the review that's mentioned on the slide there. Steve, if you want to come in on social care.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple of things, really. I think it would be really helpful to look at recruitment and retention, and particularly of social workers, and across adults and children's. I don't know how many there is a shortage in adults, but I know nationally it's over 6,000 now. Not enough social workers to go around. There's an increasing trend for people to move towards being an agency social worker. So if you've got 2 years qualifications as a social worker now, and you decide to jump to be an agency, across the East Midlands, the average pay rise that you will get moving from a social work job to an agency job is £20,000 a year. So that's really tempting for our social workers at the minute. Petrol costs going up, the mortgages are going up, food costs are going up, and they can do it. They can give the notice and start for an agency the day after. So it's vital, I think, as a council, we look about what we can do to support our social workers staying in Nottinghamshire. Not for their sake, because everybody's struggling sort of in the situation financially as it is now, but for the sake of the children and for the sake of the council's budget, we've got to look at how we retain our own social workers, and that's exactly the same across adults. So I think that's a really important bit of work. The second point that you made about fostering and adoption, the national review that Josh McAllister did, the safeguarding review, if that's scrutinised, that makes some quite interesting suggestions, particularly about how councils manage fostering services and how the private sector works and how perhaps we could do better. So I think that's another really important area, but scrutinising the independent review and the learning from the serious case reviews. I think that would come in to looking at fostering and adoption.
Thank you for that, Steve, and thanks, Councillor Lee. Councillor Carr, please.
Thank you. We already do look at Councillor Lee. I agree with what you say, but the department already does look at specific school numbers requirements in areas. some of you may or may not know that the senior school in my patch, Bramcote College, is about to be, after so many years, be rebuilt. And it was identified that the area actually will need extra spaces in the next few years, so the advice from the county council, quite rightly, was build it bigger. The problem with the schools bill that's being proposed is that existing academies that were given land as part of becoming the academy, which is what Bramcote College happened, will have that land taken off them. Doesn't actually say where that land's going to, whose ownership that land's going to go in, but it won't be the trust. So that's something we can look at, because I know of a lot of schools, not just in Nottinghamshire, but all over the country, that have been rebuilt because they have sold land to developers in order to release funds to build the school. Are we still going to be able to do that? But that is something we're going to be looking at, isn't it, as part of the work programme. Another thing that perhaps would be a good eye for a very, very quick review is what we do in schools about education around social media bullying. Now, I've just spent part of my my division fund to the primary school in my area for a package that will last them for a year or so, which educates them on what to look out for, what not to do, what to do if you are subject to it. Now, I'm just wondering, is that happening in all schools, or is it just happening in schools where the local county council have actually provided the funds for them to be able to do that? It was relatively cheap. It was £360 for a whole primary school. I think we could probably look at doing that in all primary schools in the area. And the other thing is, of course, we're quite a way down now with regards to family centres, and perhaps a look at that and where that will be going and what services are going to be transferred into the family centres. Because I have to say, and you know what I'm going to say, Councillor Taylor, is that some of my residents who use the children's centres are looking just across the border at Nottingham City, who are closing a considerable number of children's centres, and they're getting a bit worried about what the future is for them. I have tried to put them, actually ease their worries, because you have told me before, Councillor Taylor, that there's going to be family hubs in every borough and district, sometimes more than one. And but it would be good to know and discuss and have some scrutiny around what is going to be delivered from these family centres. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. On the last point, you're absolutely right. The administration are committed to rolling out family hubs in every district. I'm looking at the cabinet member who is there, so has heard your point loud and clear. I'm going to bring in Karen Human, if I may, on the sale of land query you raised. But before I do, yes, we can absolutely review how this scrutiny committee can support schools to deal with online bullying, and I'm sure that will be something we can add to the work programme, and I'll take it to overview and scrutiny at the next meeting. Karen, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. When schools academise, the land that goes with that academy is usually on a 125-year lease with the local authority. But I will look into the impact of the new schools bill and that question and come back to you.
Thanks, Karen. If that could be sent to all committee members, I think that'd be very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Callaghan, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and I welcome some of those items that are on the scrutiny. For myself and in my borough or patch, whatever, mental health is a big thing. And looking at the CAMS and how we're supporting children in schools and everything else with the waiting list, the lots. Also, it was said that, there's 14% of our children living in poverty. And I think, some scrutiny needs to be done around child poverty in the whole of our county, because it's not just in Mansfield. We have deprivation in lots of other parts of our county, and I think that should be a focus for scrutiny. And again, I think it's been touched on, and I think we're all saying the same sort of things about early years and the family hubs and the rollout of them and when the rollout will be, because obviously we've just gone through that pandemic and we've got children that have been born throughout that and actually have not been monitored or looked at what will be if there is any problems presenting. So that. So again, that would be for the school readiness programme, basically. And again, the SEN. So for me, again, the plans, sometimes they're a long way coming, because Nottinghamshire for a long time have said they support children in schools, so not every child needs an educational healthcare plan. But actually, they maybe need to be a little bit more than what they are, coming a little bit sooner, which again impacts on school places going forward. Have we got enough specialist provision for these children in schools? At the moment, we haven't. And again, looking at, and I think you've answered quite a bit of that, Steve, about the future of children coming under social care, but what about the children that are actually in care, and what does it look like for them transitioning out of care? What is the support going to be provided? What is the money coming in to help those children as well? And last but not least, support for disabled children, because again, that in that Ofsted report, it says some children's plans lack precision and do not follow meaningful measurements of their progress. So again, a bit of scrutiny around that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan, for those contributions. On EHCP and ICDS and the waiting times and the processes, you're absolutely right. I think at the first overview and scrutiny committee meeting, I mentioned that to them because they authorised what work we look into, and that received support for that. So we do need to look at the waiting times and the processes there. And you're right about send school places. In Nottinghamshire, we're quite lucky. All our children who are on an EHCP are being educated in schools at the moment. Now, they might not technically be the right setting, but in neighbouring authorities, they have people on EHCPs who don't attend school at all. So we are lucky in Nottinghamshire to be able to educate all those, but it is important we get them into the right setting. And I think the Send Green Paper will open up opportunities for this local authority to build more specialist schools, but also work with our mainstream schools on how they can better facilitate that. And if you see on the draft proposals there, that's a big thing and a big priority. So we will be doing that. I'm going to come to Steve on... I was coming to you for something. You'll remember.
Was it about the question of poverty and how we support?
That's the one. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's how we support children in poverty. Well, I think if we're doing a piece of work around the national review of the safeguarding, I think that will encompass the questions about how we support the most vulnerable children and the children sort of most at need and their families, and that'll incorporate the 14% of children that live in poverty. It'll be looking at early years support all the way up through to those children who sadly need to come into our care and how we support them. So I guess that's best covered through that, because I suppose it's better really if this committee follows a child's journey and understands the steps rather than looks at little bits of the jigsaw, tries to pull it together and looks widely.
Thank you, Steve. Apologies, Councillor Callaghan. You contributed that much that I wrote. It's so small I couldn't read my own writing, so apologies for that. But thank you, Steve, for saving me there. Councillor Henshaw, please, and then Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Chair. If you look at, obviously, I'm not going to be a full-time member of this committee, but looking at the proposals for your work programme, I think they are very cross-cutting and very, if we can sort of look into it in any detail, they're going to make some valuable contributions to the work of this council. In particular, the mental health things, and also the issue relating to that Councillor Callaghan's highlighted as well in relation to child poverty, because none of us in this room can be or can accept that it's acceptable that 14% of our children in Nottinghamshire live in whatever level of poverty, and I think this committee can make a valuable contribution into eliminating that percentage and bringing it down. I mean, and as you all know, Chair, the Chair of Adult Social Care and Health Scrutiny Committee, when he was trying to deliberate the work programme for his committee, he sent out an email to all members and asked the members of his committee for their suggestions, which members did send to him, and obviously some of those suggestions were incorporated in the work plan. Now, as I see it now, members of this committee will be forwarding things, and many of the things that we are forwarding will sort of work in tandem with a lot of things that you've actually got on there. But in relation to the points that Councillor Callaghan brought up, the early years and the child poverty, and particularly the support for children with disabilities, I think those need to be focused in a little more detail, because as you'll know, on the 26th, 27th of April, there was this focused Ofsted visit that highlighted some good points, but also highlighted some things that we need to sort of focus on and concentrate on. In particular, and as Councillor Callaghan has mentioned, the support for disabled children, or as I would say, children who have a disability, and their families is not consistent. So that would be something, and it would be a valuable piece of work for you as a scrutiny committee to contribute towards. And hopefully there are issues, as highlighted on that, where you can work with the Adult Social Care and Health Committee, some cross-cutting issues, in particular about recruitment and retention, and Steve's mentioned the issue on social workers. I know it's not just a problem that we have in Nottinghamshire, it's a national thing, but I think it's something that we really need to focus down on and try and eliminate the problems. And with that, I wish everybody on the committee all the best for the future, and let's hope we can all work together to improve the situation for people, not only for people in my division of Mansfield West, but in all of Nottinghamshire. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Henshaw. Just on the Ofsted inspection that was done a few weeks ago, this committee has been asked by the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council to do a response to that. So that will be one of the first things. It's not on that list, but it will, I can assure you, it'll be added. So that's one of our first set of work, is to draft up a response to that. We don't have to as an authority, but it's something we're going to choose to do. So I can see Noel making notes now, so that will definitely be on there, and we can add in, you can contribute into that through Councillor Callaghan or the individual you're subbing for. Thank you. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Although I haven't got anything to add to the work programme, you'll maybe be relieved to hear, I don't know. As a member for the day, I must say I am really happy to see the white paper on schools coming forward. As a local councillor in a village and with young children, it's great to see the impact, and it was great to see the impact, I should say, on academising rural schools and the positivity that will have on their future, because it's really important that you keep those groups together from within villages, and because they grow up together and they see each other, it's a really positive experience. So yeah, really glad to see that, and as Councillor Henshaw says, wish you all the very best as you move forward. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Adams, and I think you make a really valid, important point there. The white paper does pose a lot of opportunities, and we just did a review of our rural schools that members who were on the previous committee under Councillor Taylor will have read at length, and the white paper does propose a lot of opportunities there, particularly for our rural schools who aren't quite as attractive as a big school to multi-academy trusts that currently exist. And I think there is an opportunity that the local authority could launch a multi-academy trust, and by doing so could incorporate rural schools, which will save their future potentially in the long run. But that's something, you know, everyone will have different opinions on, and that's something this scrutiny committee needs to work really hard on. And that's one of the first things we will be doing. So I think you highlight a very valid point, and has potential to be beneficial to rural schools. So thank you for that. Councillor Darby, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say, as a mother and grandmother, how pleased I am to join this committee. With regards to the future work of this committee, I've been discussing issues of concern with residents that I represent in Collingham, which includes Newark and the surrounding villages. I run some ideas that I want to put forward to the Children and Young People's Department, and I'd like to thank them for responding to our inquiries. The first issue of concern is the dramatic rise in free school meal claimants. Latest figures show that there are now 23,882 children claiming free school meals, a fifth of their pupils. These are the figures that was available in January, and this number is expected to rise. This has dramatically risen since March 2020, the start of the COVID pandemic, as much of a concern. However, the children who just do not qualify for free school meals. Thousands more children in poverty are missing out. According to our Child Poverty Action Group, more than 1 in 3 children are in poverty. Many don't qualify for free school meals because the criteria is just too strict. Being a free school meal claimant unlocks a significant amount of other free services like holiday activities. We've read stories of starving children begging for free school meals because they're just so hungry. Can we carry out an investigation as to what we can do to help young people, not just on free school meals, but to all of those families on universal credit and other benefits? Can we as a committee look at changing the eligibility criteria to unlock things like free holidays for those who live in real poverty? The second thing is, I would like this committee to consider an investigation as to supporting smaller rural schools. As you know, on the Monday, the 25th of April, the decision was made that the future of the North Clifton Primary School was put back 12 months. How can this council work with rural schools to broaden its offer for current pupils and families and potentially draw more school places with applications from parents? Officers tell me that after considering the future of rural schools within the content of the related school bill would seem rather meaningful area for the Children of Young People Select Committee to consider. Could we look into more detail at the support that we can give and maintain to improve educational provision in rural areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. And you mentioned there a huge policy change that you'd like to see take effect. And I think that policy is set at national level, I think, if I'm right. Mr. Edwards will tell me not. And it's very important, and we'll take that forward to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But I am keen that this committee focuses on the remit that we have and implements changes that we have control of as a council. And the thing you mentioned is very important, but it is national policy. But we'll take it forward to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and see what they say. Mr. Edwards, do you have anything to add? Or?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Bailey, please.
Hi. Yeah, so looking at the proposed work plan, I think it's a good start. I'm very conscious, being on the Health Scrutiny Committee, that we all start with all these suggestions, and as the year crops on, we suddenly start adding to this list, and suddenly it's a very large list. And I'm very conscious that we want to make sure each topic gets the scrutiny it actually does deserve. The key thing I would like to take into consideration is we've got these big topics. Now, obviously, the key with a big topic is actually drilling down and what questions are we asking within that topic. So, for example, Councillor Khan mentioned about the ECHP plans. Now, obviously, we're talking about how they transition into schools, making sure it actually works in schools. However, the follow-through question is, as everyone who's got an ECHP plan, do we have any extra outside of that scope who perhaps look at it and go, don't really need it, or something like that, that when we take those into consideration, actually there's a lot more children in our schools that actually do need one, but we're not currently examining because they don't have one. So those questions, I'd hope that with some wide-ranging topics, I mean, even the schools bill, for example, that's a big topic. Now, there's lots of questions that I'm sure we haven't even thought about yet, but will crop up. So I'm conscious, I don't want to add anything to the work programme. I'd like, in good faith, to know that some of the questions are going to be drilled down and examined in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey, and you're right about those people who go undiscovered, really, and go through the system without getting the help they're entitled to or require. So when we do review the HCP and ICDS and the wait times and the processes, your point there about how do we widen the net to capture everybody is very valid, and I look forward to your contribution on that when we do the review. Councillor Welsh, then Councillor Lee, and then we'll wrap up, I think.
Hi, thank you. When Councillor Smith said he was excited about being the chair of the Scrutiny Committee, I challenge him on that because I'm so passionate about scrutiny. It's unbelievable because I actually do believe that it does initiate change if it is done in the right way, and you go into it with an open mind, which I think is really, really important. So firstly, just to say with regards to the list that I wholeheartedly agree with the list. I think what Councillor Bailey said gets the premise of things. As far as I'm concerned, it is about those questions that you ask and how we ask them. And being prepared, I think, to be quite open with regards to this, that we go in it in one way, and Councillor Bailey will know this from being on the Health Scrutiny Committee, that you can then ask a couple of questions and actually that takes us on a different, slightly different route. So it's kind of having that open transparency. With regards to areas that I would like to have looked at. I will start with early years, and on here it says early years childcare sufficiency and funding. There's another angle to this that I think is really important that is affecting people in Nottinghamshire, and that's the affordability of childcare. So whilst we have so much high quality childcare, and I know that we do because when I was looking for childcare for my own son, it was a case of which one do I choose, because I had a really good choice of childcare settings. But there is a growing concern, and this is nationally and not just in Nottinghamshire, about the affordability of childcare and whether that's actually preventing certain people from going back to work. So I do think we need to consider that and look at that. And in addition to that, as Councillor Callaghan and Councillor Henshaw and somebody else said it as well, with regards to we've been through a pandemic where children haven't been seen as often as what they would normally be seen. I know this week my little boy is going to be seen by a health visitor for the first time in nearly 2 years to have his review. He's going to be physically seen. So there are lots of children that haven't been seen. We need to check, we need to consider their school readiness and how that's going to affect them in the future. And I think that's really, really important. And then other things that are close to my heart as well is mental health. I've got a lot of friends and I work quite a lot with the National Educational Union, and there's a lot of talk about the rising number of mental health issues in schools. And SEN, which we've already spoken about. And last but not least, with regards to child poverty, I think we need to be careful about banding around this 14% figure, because obviously there are 3 different criteria with regards to child poverty. There's absolute poverty, there's in work poverty. I think when you're talking about child poverty, it's really important as a department, particularly that you know what exactly that is and what you're talking about here, because it is very, they can be actually quite different. But child poverty is definitely something we need to keep an eye on. For the fact is, as Councillor Darby mentioned, that free school meals is on the rise, and that's a huge indication that there is child poverty if free school meals is going up and is on the rise. And I'm not entirely convinced that we've necessarily got a grip on that. So I think that is something that we really need to keep an eye on. I actually think the council's done a lot of great stuff with regards to free school meals, but that number's getting greater, and there's only so much as a council we can do, so we just need to keep an eye on that. But I think everything else, excuse my voice, I think everything else has been covered in there so far. But as I said, for me, a scrutiny committee has to be open and transparent, and we all have to be able to speak freely but also we have to be prepared for sometimes that one might get knocked down a notch because something else important happens, which I know Councillor Smith is well aware of. And just that I'm really looking forward to working with you all on this. I think it's, like I said, I think Scrutiny has the ability to drive change, and that's what we're here for.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Wholeheartedly agree. And I think with the early years review, which you're passionate about, I think we can listen to the members of this committee, maybe add in family hubs as part of that, which would be very welcome from Councillor Callahan and others. Councillor Lee, then Councillor Carr, please.
Chairman, I'm going to be really quick.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee, sorry, just one moment. Lucy, did you want to come in? Sorry. My back's to the screen, so.
That's all right, Councillor Smith. Oh, and I'm just experiencing echo. That stopped. Okay, lovely. I just wanted to confirm the data point that for the reference that I gave in the presentation earlier in respect of children in poverty, because of course it's become the source of significant interest amongst committee members. So just to clarify that this the data comes from HMRC revenue published data on households below average income, and it's in respect of the proportion of children living in families in receipt of out-of-work means-tested benefits or in receipt of tax credits where their reported income is less than 60% of the median income. Apologies, that's very technical, but I thought it was important to clarify due to the questions that have been raised. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucy. I'm just going to bring Councillor Welsh in to respond.
Yes, so that will mean that there are different figures available because that doesn't include the absolute poverty criteria as well. So as I said, I think it is important that we gather all the child poverty statistics together in one place.
Thank you both. Councillor Lee's point's been mentioned, so over to Councillor Carr, please.
Just really, I think we've touched on two items that I think are also on the work programme for adult social care and health, which is the transition out of care into adulthood, and also the retention of staff, which is as important in children's services. I mean, one of the biggest problems there is, particularly in Ashfield and Broxtowe, is that you can go 2 miles down the road and work for Amazon for £10,000 a year more than what you are being a carer in a nursery, which is a huge issue. But I'd just like to congratulate you, Chair, on how you've conducted the meeting. You've been really, really open, and what a relief it's been from my experience at the Adult Social Care and Health committee meeting, which went on for 50 minutes and members were allowed to speak for 5 and then were told to shut up. I think it's important that backbench councillors do have a voice on these committees. We all have ideas that aren't always political but are sensible. Sometimes we'll disagree. I think it looks like we're going to disagree on the schools bill, for example. But you know, we should try and overcome that and come up with some really, really good suggestions that can be implemented for everyone's betterment, not just people in your particular division. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I really appreciate your kind comments. And look, as Councillor Welsh said just a moment ago, it's about we're all here for the same reason, and that's to make change to the children and young people that we all serve across the county and make their lives better. And I think this committee is a great way of helping shape cabinet policy on that. And I think, you know, all ideas are welcome to do that, and look forward to working with you all. Can I just bring in Councillor Henshaw, then I'm going to close. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. It's in relation to the, before you accept the item 4 on the work programme, there's a point on education representatives and co-optees. Is that going to be accepted when we accept the point 4, or can we talk about it now? Because, I mean, it's in relation to the report education representatives and co-optees, in relation to the people that are, or the representatives that will be on the committee that are outlined in the report, the Church of England, Roman Catholic and 2-parent governors. Now, I have no problem with that. Now, as it's been an a long ongoing issue with me in relation to this, and in relation to the Sacred Committee, that there were no humanist representatives. Not for want to try, may I add. I think they did try to get humanist views, and it does say in the report that the committee will periodically review this in relation to who they offer to be on the committee. Now, in relation to that, there are other faith groups in the county that won't be represented. There were people of no faith, and if we're going to be inclusive and representative, I think we'll at some point ought to reconsider that. I know what's in this is outlined in statute, but I mean, I think there is the flexibility to include those other representatives that I've sort of outlined. Thanks, Chair, for letting me come in.
Thank you. Just before I respond, sorry, Councillor Carr, my mistake. I didn't acknowledge your comment about cross-committee working. I've spoke to Councillor Moxon, who chairs Adult Social Care. He does place, doesn't he? Thank you. And we've met as chairs, and we've agreed that if there are any cross-committee working suggestions, we'll just choose between us who goes on that, and then members from each committee will be asked if they wish to partake in that, and so there'll be no falling out in the scrutiny suite, I can assure you. Allegedly, yes. Yes. Councillor Henshaw, yes, item 3.4 in your book references education representatives, and I believe they can only vote on education matters. How we recruit them is a question that I have myself, so I might bring Noel in if he can give you an update on that.
Now, I'm afraid I can't give an update other than to say that the representatives and co-optees are marked out as they should have been for the previous committee regime. So it is a question of a lift and shift from the committee system to place into the terms of reference for this particular committee, and it reflects the statutory situation in terms of what is required and what the framework is. That's not to say that additional representation could be looked at, but this is the statutory requirement as matters stand.
Thank you. And I don't think there's much wriggle room in the reference and terms of reference because they've been adopted at full council. But what I will do is I'll make a commitment to go away and work with officers to see how we actually recruit those education representatives on, and I'll update the next committee if that's okay. Thank you, everybody. I think that was a lengthy discussion, but a positive and welcome one. So thank you all for your thoughts. The task now for officers and Councillor Welsh and I to go away and order that into priority and get working. So we're going to be very busy on this committee, but as I say, I think working together we can make a real positive difference for the lives of our children and young people. So thank you for your time, thank you for your contributions, and look forward to working with you going forward. I'll now close the meeting. Thank you very much.